I'm commonly called Comrade Ka in the ranks of the African National Congress. My name is Kaelo Sedumedi, Dr. Kaelo Sedumedi, if you have to include my title.
And can you detail for us your involvement in the liberation movement and MK?
My political consciousness started quite earlier in my life as a teen. I must say, in the era where I grew up, around 1974, people were already starting leaving the country, being harassed. So when we had the 1976 June 16 uprising, already in my community, I had a number of people who had already left the country. So that was the beginning of my political consciousness. And later, to fast track in around 1980, I became a member of the Congress of South African Students. That was during my high school days. But seemingly some in the MK were already identifying me as a potential member of the security structures, which I was recruited when I became a student at university in 1983.
What do you think attracted them to recruiting you?
I think together with my other comrades, we were committed to the cause, and we are good in terms of our organizational skills, in terms of drawing students to campaigns in particular around the issue of free education and campaigns of the campaigns of releasing political prisoners.
And your role and involvement in the intelligence of ANC and MK, can you brief that for us?
So at university, that's when the actual recruitment happened. When at university there is a natural reason that parents cannot see you. So you could be at university or you could be in and out of the country without being detected. So I was recruited in the Department of Intelligence and Security of the ANC, and later part of MK Intelligence. Our role, our unit, because we had a unit that worked on national security and intelligence from the ANC point of view, was to detect the infiltration that was happening within the African National Congress, including the internal structures of the mass democratic movement. Because there was a lot of infiltration that was happening, particularly by the special branch of the SAPS, but other units also of the South African Defence Force.
And what, in your opinion, was the mission of these infiltrators?
The mission of the infiltrators is actually to work against the historic mission of the ANC. Because if you talk about the historic mission of the ANC, you're talking about the African National Congress must see to it that there is national unity, there's non-racialism. We are talking about a mission of having a unitary state, but over and beyond that, there is also a strategic objective of the ANC to say, if you cannot just talk about non-racialism, if there's still other elements of which you can call political contradictions in the country. So what are those contradictions? We have to reverse issue of land dispossession, So that's something that we can talk later about. We need to talk about de-racializing the South African economy. We need to talk about the education system that has to be also de-racialized. We can also, deliberate more on those issues later.
With regards to the ANC's historic mission, do you believe today the current leadership is falling short of achieving the goals of its historic mission?
Today, we cannot say that the ANC leadership has political capacity nor social capital to follow through that historic mission of the ANC. You'd remember that the cadres of the African National Congress met in 2020, September, to actually discuss the current status of the ANC, whether are we still in line with our historic mission as a movement. And the comrades came to a conclusion that we are not in line with that historic mission, and the leadership that we have currently is not capable. And that summit came to a conclusion and had a result of what we call now the Turnaround Strategy 2025 document, which comrades concluded that the current leadership of the African National Congress is not capable of delivering a genuine political program, to the masses of South Africa.
Can you explain to us your involvement in convening the summit of the 2025 Turnaround Strategy, and what were the motivations behind convening such a summit?
The summit preparations started soon after we had discussion with one of the officials around the issue of financial freedom, because really what we were talking about initially, we were talking about economic and financial freedom when comrades came together to say we need to form stockfairs and other entities which will ensure that we've got financial freedom. And the response as a guidance from the ANC leader, which then was the Secretary General, he said, how are we going to get a license of an insurance company or a bank, if we have to follow that vision that we have? And then we asked, how is it possible, to be asked that question? Because we have an ANC that is in government, which we expect to be able to give us that license. And hence we said, now this will need a political move on our part. Hence, we have to gather other comrades to talk about the summit and broaden this issue beyond the financial freedom of comrades. I think that's how we got involved. And then what later happened is that we had to coordinate broadly with other comrades who shared the same frustration, which actually it was quite a lot of comrades nationally.
Was this summit convened through official structures of the ANC?
Now, what happened is that before the summit was convened, there were a number of meetings with officials of the African National Congress. And we brought to them an analysis of the situation in the country, particularly as influenced by the ANC, that we are leading a country that is potentially going to a sustainable instability. That's what we put to the comrades of that is the ANC officials. And they said we must produce a paper so that, it can guide them in terms of our thinking. And we said, no, that paper will only be a result of the CADA summit, which they were not sure whether it is a correct political move from our part, but we convinced them to say it's important that we have that summit where a proper analysis of the situation, political situation in the country, particularly internal ANC dynamics, could be analyzed.
Is the CADA summit you're referring to, is it the one that was misinterpreted by the media as a basis for planning a coup?
Indeed. The CADA summit was misinterpreted to be a coup or a coup attempt, and it was not so. This was a political expression by members of the ANC from all structures of the ANC, even those that are no longer active, those who consider themselves cadres. We had teachers, people from the military, people from the health services, ordinary unemployed comrades. who came to attend the summit. So it was a summit of ANC cadres who came to share their views on how they would like to see the African National Congress be guided, in terms of its historic mission, as we explained in the summit.
And in your opinion, what do you think was behind the media's perception of this Cater Summit being the foundations of a coup?
Well, I may say that was mischievous, because the engagement with ANC officials was open, and we showed respect to the ANC official because we recognize that these are leaders of our movement. Hence, that's where we started in terms of our engagement, to say we are identifying a problem here in the ANC, and we need to be guided by the leaders. And obviously that guidance must have input from the general membership and other cadres of the African National Congress. Hence the summit was convened in September 2020.
This summit is the one that resulted in the drafting of the Turnaround Strategy 2025. Am I correct?
That's correct.
For our viewers, may you please just explain briefly, or not in too much detail, what the Turnaround Strategy actually is?
The Turnaround Strategy, it's a document which, it's as a result of the Cadre Summit in September 2020 and what it has achieved. It addressed generally three things there. It highlights what is the problem currently in the African National Congress. That's the first thing. Secondly, it addresses why is there a problem in the African National Congress. Thirdly, it addresses how do you address that problem or challenges in the African National Congress. So the Turnaround Strategy 2025 document broadly addresses those three questions.
Can you talk us through some of the core elements of the 2025 Turnaround Strategy?
Indeed. If you address, say, the first question, to say what is the problem, the Turnaround Strategy, started by painting a broader picture, global, national, and indeed the picture internally of the African National Congress. And the comrades in the Cadre Summit came to a conclusion that there are crises that can be categorized differently. For example, and I won't go into detail, comrades said, no, there is a crisis of legitimacy, with the ANC leadership, but also with members. When people see today the members of the ANC, they ask themselves whether what we are saying is it what we are going to do, what we are promising through various elections manifesto. Is it really something that we are going to do? So that is an issue of legitimacy. But beyond the issue of electioneering, the issue is, do we still stand for what we say we stand for as the ANC? Do we still have a genuine political program that is able to convince the South African people? By the way, we say the ANC is a leader of the South African people. There's a new terminology called is a leader of society. The correct terminology is that the ANC is the leader of the South African people. So that is the first crisis of legitimacy. Now we've got also the crisis of morality. So when the general South African masses look at the ANC members or ANC leadership today, they say these are people who are just after money. These are people who are just after tenders. These are people who are just there for themselves. And that is not the mission of the ANC. So that is just an example of crisis of morality. But also, it's also about, do we still stand for what is truthful, the experiences of the South African people? Now we come to another crisis, which I think is important. Lastly, it's the crisis of game rules. So the African National Congress today has been caught in different maneuvers and games, both nationally and internationally. So some of these programs, the ANC is always forced, to respond to those programs without having an initiative. So the political programs of the ANC are being destroyed so that it doesn't have an initiative. Today, what is called that, the narrative of the ANC is not properly captured within the South African masses. Hence, you'll have examples of saying, we've got a concept like the rule of law, which tends to neutralize whatever the African National Congress could try to do, even if that's what is truthfully required by the South African people. You say, no, we cannot do certain types of transformations. For example, on the triple BEE, which has been reversed because there is a rule of law which cannot, overturn that. So that's just 3 examples of answering the question, what is the problem? I can go on if you want me to address the other question of why is there a problem.
You can address that actually.
Okay.
Why is there a problem?
There are 2 areas which I'll just highlight on. There are many other areas why is there a problem. The first problem is that we took negotiations as an end in themselves. Remember when we voted on the 27th of January 1994, it was a statement to install a government which was composed of a political majority, so that that government is able to implement certain programs which will be aligned to the historical mission of the ANC. But that shouldn't be an end in themselves, because you still had other wider programs that you needed to identify with and implement, which is part of the historic mission of the ANC, which is a decolonization program. So that is one part of why is there a problem. But secondly, we can come internal to the ANC, is that the certain structures of the ANC were destroyed. And for example, can give an example of the security structure, which is an important structure for any liberation movement. It's unheard of for any liberation movement coming from exile or after unbanning. You simply destroy a security structure. The other structure that was destroyed is the commissariat. So today, when you listen or talk generally to an ANC member today is not political, because we have removed the commissariat from the ANC life. And thirdly, we used to have a publicity department of information and publicity in the ANC. So that is non-existent. Today we have what you call a communications team. That is not enough. You need a fully fledged information and publicity organ within the ANC that will cut across various programs of the ANC and inform the public, particularly also conscientizing the members of the ANC about what the ANC is all about, what programs are going to be implemented and when, and also as a mobilization tool, of ANC structures.
What do you think is the motivation behind disbanding official structures within the ANC, such as the commissariat, like you said? Do you think it's more to do with limiting political awareness amongst members of the ANC or newly inducted members of the ANC?
Yeah, one of the things which I just mentioned earlier is that the why is a member of the ANC ordinarily today not political? The analysis that comrades came up with from the summit, it's clearly that it's a deliberate thing because a politically conscious membership will be able to scrutinize, the organization membership, including its leadership. So what would happen is that every aspect of political life of the organization wouldn't be found wanting because the leaders will be held to account in terms of their roles, as leaders of the ANC. So clearly, that type of analysis that came from the criminals, that clearly this is an infiltrated organization because a number of comrades cannot face up to scrutiny, So, which brings us to the point of the issue of also revolutionary, what you call usually revolutionary morality, is usually badly defined in the African nation, because sometimes when we talk about revolutionary morality, we think that it is a wrongdoing in terms of economic or financial transaction. But it has to do with how do you exercise revolutionary conduct to the benefit of the African National Congress with respect to its mission. I think I've tried to explain that.
So do you believe the current leadership of the ANC is not instituting any credible programs socially or economically or politically because they lack the political will, or they themselves have been turned?
If you don't, or you neglect your revolutionary conduct as a cadre of the African National Congress, it is highly likely that you won't be willing to implement any of the programs of the ANC, including the resolutions of the ANC. By the way, when you even talk about resolutions of the ANC, they are a subset of the broader decolonization program. For example, if you say there's a resolution on radical socio-economic transformation, and it's supposed to be implemented by the leaders of the African National Congress, that is a subset of what a broader decolonization program is supposed to achieve. So revolutionary conduct dictates that you look at what you agree at conferences and implement it as disciplined leaders of the ANC. But beyond that, you look at its historic mission of the organization to say, are you implementing this historical mission of the ANC to achieve a non-racial and united nation in this country?
Is it currently possible in this political climate for the ANC to pass resolutions and implement them when certain individuals and leaders in the ANC are politicizing resolutions and tying resolutions to factions?
Indeed, what's happening is that, you see, there is a difference between a guideline by a higher structure of the African National Congress and a resolution. Because a guideline, you may not necessarily capture the whole resolution, that is in its totality. Hence, a guideline is regarded as being functional by a number of structures because it's not necessarily capturing what the initial resolution from conference is saying. For example, nowadays comrades are talking about a step aside, resolution. That is a guideline. It's not a resolution because there are a number of things that are being said in that resolution, which is called the integrity resolution. That if there are allegations against comrades or charges placed against certain comrades, those comrades are supposed to step aside. So comrades have to be careful when they talk about guidelines and they talk about a resolution. Those are two different things.
So when we frame the turnaround strategy of 2025, is that a guideline or is it a resolution?
The Turnaround Strategy 2025, it's a political program which would be able to assert the leadership role of the African National Congress. The Turnaround Strategy 2025 is a political program that will help the ANC to be reclaimed from its lost cause, because currently it is an organization that is running rudderless, because we frame concepts which we fail to even contextualize what they mean. For example, if you say renewal, what does renewal mean? So we need to have a genuine political program that explains what renewal is all about. So the Turnaround Strategy 2025 explains even how to renew the ANC, but we say the ANC has to be reclaimed by its members and the South African people. Let's remember that the African National Congress was formed by the South African people, by our forebears. It was not formed only by the members of the ANC. Hence, it cannot just be an organization about constitutionalism and what you can call legalese. It's an organization that was formed by the South African people.
The programs that the Turnaround Strategy 2025 leans on, how so do you believe they will effectively readdress the socio-economic issues that we face in society today, i.e. border security, immigration, also the state of our economy and unemployment, especially amongst youth? And do you believe that the current leadership of the ANC has not done enough to address those issues?
Yeah, the Turnaround Strategy 2025, when it comes to how do we address the challenges of the ANC, broadly deals with two areas which are quite critical. The issue of sovereignty has to be reclaimed, because we cannot even talk about an economic program which other people are busy talking about without really dealing with sovereignty. What do you mean about sovereignty? Who is sovereign? In South Africa, sovereign should be who we are voting for. It's important to understand that. Every 5 years, people go and vote for members of parliament. Hence, parliament has to assert its sovereign status, as an institution. That is the legislature. So that is one area when we talk about sovereignty. So in other words, from there it has to be able to pass certain laws or reverse certain laws which would be beneficial to what you're asking for, about the programs that are important to the South African public. Then we move to the programs that are critical. There are certain conventions that as a nation we have ratified. For example, on the issue of immigration, it's important to distinguish between a refugee and an economic migrant. So those conventions have been agreed upon by South Africa and the international bodies. So the laws are there, who's supposed to be a citizen, who's supposed to be an economic migrant, who's supposed to be a refugee. That is quite clear. So it's about government playing its role so that we avoid today what we call other operations. I think they call it Operation Operation Tutula, the government must do its work so that you don't find a situation whereby you find foreign nationals being banned in our streets, or even foreign or illegal foreign nationals killing South Africans. So that can be avoided by the leadership role of government. So that's one of the programs that one could look at. But there's also a program of, education. Usually you'll hear, employers today in South Africa saying we don't have enough qualified people. Now you ask yourself, if there are a lot of these unemployed graduates and employers think that they are not a fit to, the economic or financial well-being of their companies, why can't they be retrained? Because the employers can do that, but they can do that in collaboration with government, in particular with the Department of Education, which brings me to the Department of Education, or our education system. We cannot have parallel systems of education as we are having today in South Africa. Hence, we are having this issue of unemployment, even from people who are highly qualified. We have a private education system and public education system. So what we need to go back to this historic mission to say we need one education system which will assert the issue of saying the doors of learning and culture shall be open to all, as the Freedom Charter states. So it is possible to have a situation whereby we have well-trained, tailor-made people for various industries. Then we can move also to look at industries. Today we talk about South Africa has lost a strategic manufacturing capacity. So the issue is, do we even comprehend? Does our leadership today comprehend? That's what we asked actually the National Working Committee when we met them after the Turnaround Strategy 2025. That do they really understand what is meant by manufacturing? Because it's quite a broader concept, and it is one area whereby South Africa, we need to identify specific skills or skill sets which could help the country. Because if you talk about the Black Industrialist Program, we are not addressing the manufacturing capacity of South Africa. So it is an area which we think the Turnaround Strategy 2025 drafters can assist the ANC leadership on.
With regards to these social issues which you just highlighted, mainly the economy, immigration, and such aspects of society, do you believe that these problems are a result of, again, the lack of political will of the current leadership, or do you think it is by design?
What I was supposed to add on in terms of the crisis, the other major crisis is a crisis of leadership. A leadership that is politically conscious will be able to identify these type of social ills. For example, the role of the Reserve Bank, it seems it's deliberately being ignored in terms of the economic agenda of transforming the South African economy so that it's inclusive, but it's broadly participatory. So that if you say you talk about access to economic opportunities and finance, that is also facilitated, by your central bank, and it also includes your whole financial system, so that there is access to the whole financial system by those who want to participate in the economy.
regards to the transformation of the economy, it can be viewed as if the current leadership of the ANC does not have cohesive plans to readdress the economic situation in South Africa. When the previous resolutions adopted in 2017 in Nasrec were factionalized, as I said earlier on, and tied to a faction of RET or anti-New Dawn policies.
Yes.
Now, what we see in society today is that the current leadership's plan around transforming the economy seems to lean towards privatization of state assets. If certain state assets such as PRASA, Transnet, Eskom are privatized, will that not reduce the state's capacity to mitigate social issues?
Indeed, it will reduce the state capacity to meet and address those social issues. Remember, even before we talk about the state-owned enterprises and their role, South Africa has what you call the National Development Plan. A national development plan cannot just be a plan promising people to be happy. It's not a promise to be happy, but it has to address certain strategic questions of saying, what is it that the country is able to produce? What is it that becomes our advantage or competitive and comparative advantage in the country, in the world? So it is possible that through the capacity that is there, that is ignored within even the ANC or within the nation, to be able to say the competitive advantage can be mobilized from the South African population, particularly even those people which we ignore, which are unemployed, because we've got professionals who are employed, who are not, even those that are employed are not fully engaged, to be able to address these issues. So if you talk about these state-owned enterprises, so the National Development Plan, if it is able to say we need this type of products, all these state-owned enterprises are able to identify various products. For example, if you talk about having an automobile, a South African automobile or South African car, what stops a company like Dinel from looking into that? What stops capacity, like if you say we have to cast a block in an engine? We have that capacity in South Africa. Various academic institutions here have done research on how to cast even a gearbox for Boeing. So what is difficult for casting specific components that will be able to enhance this manufacturing capacity through our state-owned enterprises? And I'm just taking Dinel as an example. But if you talk about even maintenance work through Transnet and PRASA, you use the same methodology, from one. But the vision has to be clear in terms of what the National Development Plan has to achieve. Because if you look at the Southern African Development Corporation, the SADC region, they would also look at South Africa in terms of maintenance of their rail, for example, the transportation system and other critical infrastructure.
Do you believe the mismanagement of key state-owned enterprises was intentionally done to reduce South Africa's capacity to undertake these projects?
What we explain in the Turnaround Strategy 2025, we say South Africa today is a neo-colonial settlement. And when you talk about the neo-colonial settlement, it is it espouses what you call a neoliberal agenda as its ideology. So that has to be anchored. If you talk about neoliberal agenda, it has to be anchored on co-option and indeed corruption. So the state-owned enterprises are not immune, from this co-option. When I say co-option, some of the leadership being co-opted, and we have seen all the allegations that have been made against certain leaders. So state-owned enterprises cannot just be privatized if you say you have a national agenda of reversing these deep social ills that we have in South Africa of unemployment, poverty, and income inequality that we have. So you need all the facets, whether it's on transportation, arms manufacturing, airlines. Those are critical, for the economy. And I mean, it also dovetails to other industries like tourism in terms of your airlines. So the starting point is, also what we call the National Development Plan, as I said.
Do you believe that within the ANC and its official leadership structures, such as the NEC, that there are those who would be opposed to the implementation of the TS 2025 and its policies?
From our experience, we have seen an indifference from, in terms of the attitude of the members of the ANC NEC with respect to the Turnaround Strategy 2025. Because after various engagements with the National Working Committee of the ANC, we expected them to come back to us as people who are coming from the CADA Summit. And comrades never reverted to us, so that these discussions are taken further on the modalities of how these ideas of the Turnaround Strategy 2025 get infused into the life of the ANC. And when I say the life of the ANC, I mean, how do they become part of branch discussions and all other structures of the ANC and other policy discussions of the African National Congress. So it needed a better comprehension from the members of the National Executive Committee.
What reason do you think people in the National Executive Committee and National Workers Committee, what reasons do you think they have for rejecting the turnaround strategy?
And it will take me back to all these crises that I've explained to say what is the problem, because comrades in the summit, they went to detail to explain and characterize, the type of leadership that we have. By the way, when we talk about this, even the leaders of the ANC were invited to be part of those deliberations, so that it's not a gossiping forum. So there is lack of capacity to appreciate the seriousness of the situation that we find ourselves in. For example, we want against the elections that the African National Congress is going to be humbled in the local government elections, and comrades were not listened to by the leadership. So the whole analysis around what is an economic program and what the politics that are happening in the country, that analysis was given to members of the NEC. So what could be causing their indifference. It's clearly, obviously, the crisis of leadership, but the lack of that revolutionary conduct, which we think stems from the fact that we have an ANC leadership that is heavily infiltrated. We have comrades who are really not committed to serving the ANC. They are serving something else, but they are not serving the ANC.
Lastly, do you think there is a future for the ANC without the implementation of this turnaround strategy?
I don't see any future of the ANC without a genuine political program like the Turnaround Strategy 2025. Currently, this is the only political program that can not just save the ANC, but save the nation. Remember, we usually say the African National Congress is the leader of the South African people. So those in the ANC and those who are able to associate as comrades in the ANC, we have a unique opportunity to deliberate and craft strategies which will be able to assist the country. And one such outcome which comrades came up with is the Turnaround Strategy 2025, which is currently the only genuine political program which has to be implemented if ever we are serious about saving the African National Congress. Thank you.